UI. We'll host that data service on the open data site on the NIFC org. And then we will combine that data with the DOI data with USDA data, state and local data to come up with a interagency fuels treatment perimeter data service. So that's where we're going with all this. So I'm going to talk a little bit about that first piece, which is the service that allows the field users to, help plan and implement their processing. So really, the new acronym WFFTS, which is the Wildland Fire Fuels Treatment Service. And really the purpose of that service is to provide the field a tool to capture these fuels treatments, capture this information as part of their planning and implementation workflow. We've already got folks out there in fuels land. If you're doing a prescribed fire, you've got to come up with a burn plan. That burn plan is going to have the map of the fuels. That's going to have information on, where you're doing your lighting activities, where you're doing your holding, any roads in the area that you're using to get there, that kind of thing. So they're already capturing a lot of that information. So what we're doing is going to provide that service that allows them to, the GIS data service that allows them to capture that, whether it's in the field, on their phones, using web apps, a simple web app where the user can go in and basically draw in where they want the fuels treatment to go or that kind of thing. Or, using GIS desktop software. Most folks will use their phones or the web app, that kind of thing. And then that collected data can be used for creating map outputs. So whether it's an IAP map for their fuels treatment prescribed fire, it could be for, just a general map of the mechanical fuels treatment, where that location is, that maybe they include in a contract, they add that into the contract for the vendor to figure out where the treatment is, that kind of thing. And then in the background, we can pull that data out for informed fuels. So this process has worked really, really well. It's the same workflow we're using for the National Incident Feature Service. Been doing it since about 2016 with the NIFS. And the NIFS allows the incident to track all of the spatial information for an incident, fire perimeters, drop points, helospots, that kind of stuff. And then in the background, we pull off those fire perimeters and serve them up to the public. We're tying into the existing workflow of both the wildland firefighter and the fuels manager to provide them tools to do their job and then pull information out that we need. So that's kind of the point of the service. If there's any questions as I'm kind of going through all this, please, jump in. I might not see a hand raised or anything like that, but please just kind of jump in if you've got questions. And I just opened the chat. So excellent. Thank you, Jill. WFFTS is on there. So like I said, our target audience for a lot of this is really the folks in the field doing the fuels treatments. So we're going to try and capture the data that helps them do that. And we talk a little bit about that data set. Here's an example of an IAP done for a prescribed fire down in Grand Canyon this spring. And as you can see, they have things like the fire or the perimeter of the treatment units, things like gates, staging areas, drop points in the legend over there, resource locations, what line types they're going to do, how they're going to access that. This was all collected using a service. The Park Service has had something like this for a few years. We're now just kind of rolling this out to the interagency community. So this allows the non-technical user to build a pretty quick and simple map to get everybody on the same page and do some communication. So, and the service that I showed you in the first thing, this is just the item details or information page from ArcGIS Online. It's all hosted in ArcGIS Online, all managed there. And then that particular service can be added to a web map. Here's an example of a web map that I just on the fly did yesterday. Added some data. There's a prescribed fire piece in the middle. There's some fuels treatment pieces on the sides. If you click on them, you can get an information pop-up. Real simple in this particular case, treatment name, how it was mapped, what the acres are, that kind of thing. And then you can also add things like firing method. So these particular lines here get into the how this particular line is an ignition pattern. So it details how that particular unit is going to be burned. Again, all stuff that's used by the field when they're planning and implementing their particular burns. Got some points over here for things like pile burns. Where are your piles that you're going to come back and burn later? Some of the symbology, I'll just kind of scroll through this real quick. Water tanks, pumps, signs, things like helospots, division breaks, medical, staging area. I talk about this burn pile one that I added earlier, which is new. Where possible, we're using the same exact symbology as the National Incident Feature Service, so that folks that are used to seeing one symbol on the wildland fire side will see the same symbol in the fuels treatment data side. And many of those data elements that are on the wildfire side are data standards. So they're NWCG data standards that have been approved. So we have things like values at risk, landmarks, water development sites, all sorts of points, lines, completed hose lay, mowing line, leaf blower, burnouts, mixed construction line, all sorts of different line types to capture what's going to go on the ground. And then we get down to the polygon side. So we've got prep work, firing methods, resources, hazards in these polygon types. And then the treatment polygon itself ties back to the elements in informed fuels: mechanical, biological, chemical, planned ignition, and unplanned ignition. And things like the planned ignition, you can get in here and change the category a little bit for the more specific type of treatment type. In this case, it's an underburn, but there is a set pick list for the type of treatments that tie back to that. Let's see. Craig had a question. Are you referring to ESRI field maps as the tool to gather data in the field? Yes, ESRI field maps would be the tool to use in the field in this particular case. And then in this particular case, this fuel service is really meant to work in conjunction with the Inform Fuels application. Inform Wildfire has a different mobile app or mobile web map that's designed to work in that, and BJ can tell you all about that one. So that service can then be put into a simple web map. It can be put into a simple app, put into field maps, so that the user has a lot of flexibility for how they want to collect data. And then from the GIS side, we can drop it in our desktop software, GIS Pro, if we want to do more complicated polygons or something like that. Currently, Informed Fuels doesn't support anything other than just a quick on-screen digitizing. So you can go in there and click some points. So in order to have those more complex polygons, say you got a 10,000 acre polygon, you don't necessarily want to go into a simple interface and do all that clicking. You would drop into ArcPro or the like to create those polygons and provide that. So we're using COTS software wherever possible to kind of save on development cost in the informed fuels side. All right, we talked a little bit about symbology. This is the map symbology for wildfire. And you'll recognize some of the accountable property and assignment breaks and a lot of the air op stuff. Those are all the same. So where we have an aerial hazard in fuels, it's the same symbol as the aerial hazard, same meaning as aerial hazard in wildfire. Very important for folks that do both. A lot of people do fire response and fuel treatments. So we've got to look out for our group like that. A few highlights for symbology that's different. That treatment polygon, like I said, it matches the inform fuel treatment categories. There's some line symbols, things like where to mow prior to a prescribed fire or hose lay. There's additional transportation features, ATV access, things like that. An event point, additional fire line features, ignition point, burn pile. And we've got both approved and proposed aviation types for helispot, dip site, draft site, so that people can propose those and see those on the map as proposed before they're approved by the aviation side of things. All right, so let me highlight something real quick here. So I went in here and you can see the thinning polygon, thinning, and then there's a burning polygon in the middle. This is the service, and then I can jump into informed fuels. This is in their UAT process, and then I can see that those same polygons show up in there. And what I can do is I can get in here and turn on and off the layer for the WFFTS. It's kind of down here. Sorry, it's really small, but I can turn those layers on and off and see the polygons that have already been added to Inform. And I can say, hey, I really want to copy in that one that's sitting in the middle. So I'm going to go in here, turn that on. I can select it. And then you'll see two copy option. Copy as a new estimated treatment. So I can click copy. It'll bring that into Inform Fuels and allow me to then build it out. Treatment name. I think I call this Treatment Central. We run out of good names pretty quickly when we're doing demos. Local IDs. It's an estimated treatment because it's a planned treatment. Plan's kind of standing in for that. And we're going to do planned ignition. It's going to be a type of a underburn. So then Inform Fuels will prompt you. It'll say, okay, you've got some unsaved fields. You've got some fields required fields that are missing. I'm just going to save this before I go too much farther. You can edit the perimeter in here if you want, but it's basically just simple editing with points. So you can kind of drag points around. Not the interface you want if you want to do some more complex editing. So you go down through this whole process and type in Inform Fuels the various things. There is going to be, you can see in here, there's some congressional district, state, county, calculated acres. Those are all auto-generated based on the location of the polygon. So wherever possible, that it's auto-generated, so there's less user entry and less user mistake as well. There's some feasibility information. I'll just cruise through this real quick. Actually, I probably don't even need to do this, but funding sources, departments, personnel costs, and then contributed costs from other agencies, dates when you're going to initiate the project, fiscal years are auto-populated. You see some of this stuff is auto-populating. And then there's some that for your particular agency. So you can save it. And now what we've done is we've successfully brought that perimeter in from a service that's used by a lot of different people and brought it into the Inform Fuels app just through a simple copy and paste. Inform Fuels is different than NIFPORS used to be because NIFPORS was a non-spatial database, whereas Inform Fuels is a spatial database to start with. So you can't create a record without starting with that geometry. So that's why it was the copy to. So you copy that in there, and then that allows you to enter in all the rest of the attributes about that information. Let's see. Let's see if there's any chats. Go ahead.
Yeah, Jill had a question in chat.
How does WFFTS play with the US FACS program? Will users need to enter data in both environments? At this particular point, the WFFTS has that tie into Inform Fuels. Now, the Forest Service could use the service to do its planning and mapping and all that kind of stuff, and then take that polygon and put it into FACS. That's a possibility. At this point, that's kind of up to the Forest Service to decide how they want to use that. Could be used by the states too, even though that service does tie into Informed Fuels, it's not a service that's meant to only be used by DOI. It's meant to be used by the whole interagency community as they're planning and implementing treatments. Be real helpful for cross-boundary treatments, where you've got, say, Park Service on one side, Forest Service on one side, state, local, kind of all in the same area. You could all use that same service to jointly plan and implement those particular treatments, much the same way we use the NIFS to jointly respond to wildfire incidents. More questions?
Just a comment, Skip. This is Susan for Jill. Just so you know, we are actively planning for the IFTDIS FTEM treatment integrator to pick up the new service that Skip is showing us here, and also bring in the fax treatments as we have in the past, so that those can be fed to the FTEM IFTDIS application. So there'll be one service out there that still combines them, at least for a little while.
Excellent. Thank you. I appreciate the information.
Yeah, the WFFT service, think of it as kind of prior to reporting, right? You could use this a lot for your planning and implementing treatments. And then when you have a planned polygon, you would go into, in this case, Informed Fuels and say, hey, here's the polygon we're going to do. You could sit back in WFFTS, do your implementation and say, well, okay, we didn't quite burn as much as we thought, so we're going to go GPS what we actually did burn. And then you would enter that completed polygon into Informed Fuels. Much the same process could be done probably with fax. I don't know that workflow, but I do know, when I used to work for the state and others, it would be great to have a tool like this that we could use our mobile device, go out in the field, figure out what our treatments are going to be, do our planning, and then grab a copy of that data and enter it into whatever reporting process we had down the road. When is this expected to go live? We're just this week, yesterday, today, and tomorrow, testing the interface between the WFFT service and Informed Fuels, and it seems to work really nicely. You saw the copy and paste. It was a live demo and it worked. So you saw that. It's pretty simple. It's just grabbing something from one service and copying it to another data set, basically. So once that process is firmed up, we should be able to go live.
So I think Chris raised his hand in the room, and then we'll hit the people online.
Okay, yeah. Chris?
Yeah, hi, Chris Stroll with Forest Service. I'm curious about, so I understand the workflow going into Informs. How about, is there like an interface for the prior to plan and implementation, the NEPA work? So that polygon may originate as a NEPA polygon from that, whatever that system is generating that feed into this service and then into the reporting side as well. A whole flow from like that. Is that something people have thought about?
You could certainly use that for collecting a planned polygon for NEPA. You could go in the service, you could draw it in, give yourself a project area boundary or anything. We don't have any NEPA specific data elements in here right now, but we could certainly do that for version 2 if there was a need for that. We're trying to tailor this to really help on the the planning and implementation side. So if someone says, hey, we need some information, or we need a polygon that defines a NEPA project boundary or something like that. Yeah, I don't see why not. This would be a good time, or a good, the geospatial subcommittee is kind of helping manage this. So I would suggest providing feedback to Jill and Cole, and then they can kind of loop back with me, and then we can see how we can build this out a little bit more useful for version 2.
Yeah, thanks.
Sure. Yeah, this is really the version 1. This is the first step. So, once we demonstrate the usefulness and applicability of this, then we can move to version 2. As we've managed the NIFS over the past 7 years, it's kind of a continual improvement every year. So we're constantly iterating on that and making updates and improvements. So I see this as being very similar. Cole?
Oh yeah. So my comment was backhanded, Skip. I just wanted to bring back Fimmy. I don't know why there's an echo, but yeah, and also fuels treatments are getting a lot of high priority right now. So this is a very big deal. So I think it's great that you're doing this, and and it is just it's a proven way. We've done it with other things. So yeah, this is great. So I just wanted to say, yeah, kudos.
Thanks. Ifra's got a question on, would WFFTS provide data for a calendar year and then be archived on occasion? We do that with the NIFS now because wildfires, tend to be able to be archived in January 1. So we basically keep a calendar year's data for NIFS. We had some discussions about that for this particular setup, and it doesn't really fit that model of at the end of the calendar year, we kind of archive everything that's in there and start fresh. So we're actually not going to be doing that. It's going to be rolling from, well, not rolling, it'll just be a service that'll maintain data. So if someone puts in a polygon 2 years ago, that's going to stay in the service until it's removed. So this is going to have a little bit more interaction with agency administrators. So folks are going to kind of have to work on cleaning up the data. So if they're using it for planning for a treatment, for example, once that's done, it'll be relying on the agency to kind of clear that out. And there's probably going to be some management on the ArcGIS Online side from notifying users when there's been data in there for more than a few years that hasn't been edited since, that kind of thing. So, yeah, we could take yearly snapshots of the data and provide them. So, January 1, here's what the WFFTS looked like, that kind of thing. But we also are going to run an archive in the back, so users will be able to see that data pretty much backed up consistently as well. All righty, I think that's it. Oh, Fire Incident Mapping Tool. There's another acronym.
Travis has his hand up.
All right.
Hey, Skip. So just maybe make this more of a comment, and maybe it leads into a question, or at least something worth discussing. Through the business requirements gathering for the field sample database, there's a lot of interest in people to be able to collect field sample, currently we do field moisture, but there's been talk of field loading or even photos related to field treatments or just wildfires themselves. So the current database just operates on a site out in the forest somewhere, right? And you got a point location, you go out and you gather your needles and you dry them and everything. I could see where for an incident like this, you may have several points across the incident where you're gathering those samples and kind of want to be able to see their trends unique to those points. So maybe that's kind of like a drop point. Basically, it's a point within a polygon or a point within the record here, or multiple points that then has data associated with for the fuels moisture trends or loading or photos like we've talked about. So like I said, more of a comment than a question, possibly something. I don't know how it would integrate into it in the short term. Long term, I'm fairly confident there's a lot of interest in that.
Okay. Well, thanks for the comment. I mentioned earlier that we've been doing something similar with this for the Park Service for about 3 years now. It's a very similar service. In that Park Service web map, we do have fire behavior, smoke, and weather observation points in addition to what you saw in the table of contents. So we allow our users to collect that information as well. So what you would do is then you take that WFFT service, then you add the service for the observation data basically into the same field maps. So users could do the same thing at the same time. They can kind of switch between the two. So that would be pretty simple to implement. But if you've got, some more specific examples, I'd be happy to work with you. We've been doing the observation stuff for quite a few years. And there's some really cool stuff we can do with Arcade for auto calculating a lot of the fields in the weather observation for data set, for example. So.
Yeah, I think it's just good for our benefit to know what you're up to. I think that opens some opportunities for us. So hopefully Don's still there and listening intently as well.
Cool. Yeah, and since the service will be available to anyone in the org, a particular agency, or a park, say Yosemite said, hey, we're going to add custom data collection for some teeny species to this particular, when we have people out doing the planning. So if they see this, so they could add the WFFTS, and they could add a feature layer that stores the data for that particular species that they were looking for. So when they're out in the field, they could collect both at the same time. So that would be a good way to do it. All right.
Any questions or comments for Skip?
Cool. Well, thanks for the time. And like I said, we're testing it this week against Inform Fuels and how that service is copied in. And once we get that piece nailed down, we're working with Rachel and others at MBS on how to get the data out of Inform Fuels, serve that out in the open data site, and then in the future, we'll combine that DOI data with the USDA and the state and private data as well into a full interagency fuels treatment data set. Thanks. Take care.
Thank you. All right, so let's go to lunch, have a little bite to eat, and we'll come back and we'll talk a little bit about Edge, and then Keith and Chris can share what they've got going on with NASF. So how much time do we have for lunch?
We're like 45 minutes.
Yeah, we're.
I'm like so confused with time zones, like looking at the agenda and like.
We gave an hour and a half for lunch, but it was supposed to start at noon and end at 1:30. If that clock is right, is that clock right?
Yeah, that's
right.
2 hours and 15 minutes for lunch. Yeah, Skip would just be starting.
Or we just keep going. What did we do that?
We didn't.
Anytime for review.
So I think we just want to just take it out.
Yeah.
Got past her? Okay.
So we had.
Okay, so we were just more efficient than we thought we'd be. So let's do this. Let's take an hour and a half for lunch. We'll come back. We can do, Jill, let's do the data, the webpage. Let's do that today. And then that will give us a little bit more time for Irwin tomorrow. We tend to get into some deep conversations with Irwin. So that will give us a little more time for those tomorrow. So that we'll pop the website up. And I think that's, this is again part of how we're really trying to get information out and help share some stuff. So I want you guys to see that, what we're doing. Jill's been working on that, and we've added some stuff for Irwin as well. So let's talk about that. And Gabriella, maybe at that same time, you can give a quick update on the Adobe campaign where that's at, and we can talk about that a little bit, and some of the ideas that we have for that as that continues to grow and evolve. So we'll do that right after lunch. Get into the Edge updates and then NASF fuels. Give ourselves some time that way.
Don, can you pull up the WFFTS?
The what?
Can you pull up the WFFTS?
Oh, yes.
For later. Thank you, appreciate it.
Okay, so hour and a half, what time does that mean we come back?
12:45.
12:45 Pacific time. All right, thanks, everyone.
Yeah.